Welcome to part 20 of my review of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. The entire overview of the book, for all intents and purposes, is pretty much finished, so now we move on into something a little bit different. Now, after taking some time to reflect as well as read all of the comments you guys left in the previous 19 videos, yes, I did read all of them, I feel confident enough to make an actual rating system 1 through 5 stars on every single subclass using my new information from you guys as well as reflecting on it over the last couple of days. But before we talk about this review, it turns out only a small percentage of you guys who watch these videos are actually subscribed. So if you are enjoying this review series and haven't subscribed yet, consider subscribing. It's free, you can always change your mind, and it's helping out a lot more than you realize. So now let's talk about exactly how this is going to be reviewed. First off, each subclass is going to be given a rating of 1 through 5 stars. So let's break down exactly what meets the criteria for each star rating. First off, how high a subclass gets rated on the star rating is entirely based on its power level. So what does that mean? Well, to start, let's look at what most heavily influences the points given. High power abilities at early levels will gain the most points. Because 90% of D&D games do not go beyond level 10, taking into account the power level of a class in the early game is going to be the most influential way that I rate each subclass. Second, consistent abilities over high variance. In a game solely based around the concept of RNG, the more consistent your abilities, the more consistent you can activate your abilities, the better. And third and finally, how well a subclass's abilities or the subclass itself fits into the class's archetype. For example, if a Paladin subclass gets a lot of tools for tanking and a lot of tools for high burst to damage, single target damage, that's going to get a lot more points. As for what is not going to affect the star rating, the biggest thing is fun and flavor. If you are looking for what the most fun and flavorful class to play is, this is not the tier list for you. Before we jump into the first class, just a reminder, this is solely my opinion based off of feedback and careful analysis by myself. So if you feel that the stars are not aligned in the way that you see fit, be sure to disagree with me in the comments down below. Let's have a discussion. Also, any subclass in here that has either had no changes or very insignificant amounts of changes will be marked as reprint out of 5. Also, this video assumes that you either 1, have read Tasha's Cauldron of Everything and know what all of the contents of the subclasses already are, or you have already seen my entire playlist detailing the abilities in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything for all the subclasses. If you have not seen it, if you missed it or just haven't watched it yet, I will leave a link to the playlist right up here so you can go check that out. But this video implies that you have done one of those things, so be sure to do one of those things before watching this video any further. Also, in case you have not noticed, this video is really long, and because this video is really long, I will leave timestamps to every single subclass down in the description below. So if there is just one specific subclass that you would like my thoughts on, it'll be down there. You don't have to watch the whole thing if you don't want to. Although I do encourage you to watch the whole thing. It puts me really high up in the algorithm. So let's start right at the top with the Alchemist Artificer, and this gets the covetous reprint out of 10. Literally nothing changed from Aberrant, so this one gets a pass. Next up, we have Armorer Artificer, and for the Armorer, we're going to give it 4 stars. The overall power level of the early abilities, like being able to wear heavy armor without any sort of requirement, and the versatility being able to choose which armor model you get, make this a very popular contender for most powerful off-caster. The versatility of being able to choose whether you want to fulfill a tank role or a off-caster DPS role as early as level 3 is not something to take lightly. What prevents the Armorer from achieving a coveted 5-star rating would be the nerf that Wizards gave it to its guaranteed spell list, and they did remove Shield. Now, Shield was one of the first spells they get starting at level 3, which would have carried them into probably one of the tankiest classes in the game should they have kept it, but it was removed. Therefore, this drops Armorer down to a 4 stars. Still really strong, still worth picking. Next up, we have Artillerist, and Artillerist, just like Alchemist, did not receive enough of a change to warrant giving it a new rating, so it will be given another reprinted out of 5. Battlesmith, same token, does not change enough to warrant a full re-review, therefore reprint out of 5. Next up, we have Barbarian, Path of the Beast. Path of the Beast Barbarian, 3 stars. The main strength of Path of the Beast Barbarian comes from its versatility in what it gets to choose at level 3 with its various shape form of bite, claws, or tail. However, the abilities that go further on into the earlier levels are a bit lacking for what we expect out of a power level. Bestial Soul has good utility, but not really enough to warrant the level 6 slot, and everything past that at that point isn't really going to be very viable as it is only gotten into the later levels. But the main reason why Path of the Beast gets 3 stars is because of the next subclass we're going to talk about, the Path of Wild Magic Barbarian, which gets a 5-star rating. Wild Magic Barbarian is absolutely insane at early levels, even transitioning into the mid game. Every single effect on the wild magic table for this class specifically is only positive, and they are really powerful abilities into the early game. There is the concern about how these abilities do not scale with your level, but again, the fact that these abilities are this powerful in the early game is what gives this as high of a rating as I am giving it. On top of that, we talk about consistency in the ratings. The abilities after the level 3 wild magic table are meant solely to give more consistency to the wild magic table, which is already powerful enough, making this one of the best subclasses printed in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Do not sleep on the Wild Magic Barbarian. Next up, we have the Bard's College of Creation. College of Creation Bard, 3 stars. The College of Creation Bard fits into the Bard's normal archetype of the Jack of all trades. However, the power level of the abilities does seem to be a bit lacking. While there is versatility to be had here, the early game abilities and the late game abilities are slightly just a bit too weak compared to what we already have in Bard. The Performance of Creation ability does have a lot of potential uses. However, I don't think they will scale as hard as I would like to believe they would. Still, not a terrible subclass to pick, still has a good bit of potential to it. Next up, we have College of Eloquence, reprint out of 5. I messed this up in the initial review video, but the Order Domain Cleric, reprint out of 5. Next up, we have the Order of Peace Cleric, and the Order of Peace is going to get 4 stars. The spells that come baked into this subclass are very consistent with the aspect of buffing up your teammates, and that translates very well into the abilities given in the early game. Where this subclass gets the most power comes from its new channel divinity, being the Balm of Peace, basically functioning as a pseudo healing spirit post nerf, which I think is still a very good spell, and slapping that onto a channel divinity allows the cleric at level 2 to essentially full heal the party in the early levels, which we addressed earlier, in my opinion, is the most important part of the game. So having this powerful of a heal baked into your kit at level 2 is where I think this subclass gets its most power, which is why it gets the solid 4-star rating. Where this cleric subclass does not gain the 5 stars is its viability going into the mid game, where your channel divinity does not scale at all, and your level 8 potent spellcasting allows you to add your wisdom to damage on any cleric cantrip, but that's a very, very select amount of cantrip spells, so this really isn't worth it. But still a very good subclass nonetheless. Do not skip out on Peace Domain Cleric. Next up, we have Twilight Domain. Twilight Domain Cleric, 4 stars. The level 1 baked in proficiency with martial weapons and heavy armor is very strong, as well as the 300-foot dark vision, both of which you do get at level 1, making this a very powerful option. Just like the Peace Domain, one of the main sources of power that I see in this subclass is the new channel divinity, allowing a creature to gain 1d6 temporary hit points at the end of each of their turns once they stay within 30 feet of you. This is constantly refreshing hit points. It almost is as good as the Peace Domain's channel divinity, only slightly worse in my opinion, as it does not give you the same burst heal effect, which I rank higher up than just a passive heal. But still, a slow burn temporary hit point heal is nothing to scoff at. Steps of Night is a bit inconsistent, and that's why I did not give this class 5 stars. I think if this didn't have the level of inconsistency, being able to fly only in dim light or darkness, I see a world in which a cleric tries to get this off, they like fly up into the air to get a high vantage point, and someone like flips on a light for some reason. This ability immediately deactivates, they plummet and take damage. Good in the right circumstances, not consistent enough to warrant a 5-star rating. Divine Strike is just additive damage once per turn. Consistency is the key there. Twilight Shroud, kind of irrelevant at level 17. So this class is going to just remain at 4 stars. Super powerful early game abilities, consistency into the mid game, except for the fly. Moving on to Druid, we have the Circle of Spores Druid, and the Circle of Spores Druid gets a reprint out of 5. Next up, we have the Circle of Stars Druid. In my opinion, the Circle of Stars Druid deserves our second 5-star rating. While the Circle of Stars Druid does not gain an expanded spell list, it does gain the ability to cast Guiding Bolt without expending a spell slot. And I've been saying it for a long time, Guiding Bolt is, in my opinion, the best first level spell in D&D 5e. And being able to cast this without using a spell slot means that this can scale to any spell slot of Druid level, constantly leveling and upgrading with you. Going even further than that, the Starry Form ability makes Druid's wild shape much more versatile than it has ever been, allowing you to fulfill a damage-based archetype or a heal-based archetype with your Archer or Chalice constellation forms. Being able to deal 1d8 plus Wisdom Radiant as a bonus action at level 2 on top of anything else you can do as a normal action is crazy, and also being able to heal for an additional 1d8 off of even the smallest of heals should you pick Chalice makes both Heal Druid and Damage Druid extremely viable in the early game. Cosmic Omen's Wheel or Woe mechanic is probably the most inconsistently consistent mechanic in this list and makes for a nice addition to level 6. Couple this with the level 10 ability that scales the damage on your Archer form and allows you to fly in Dragon form. And while it doesn't really add too many points because you get it so late, the ability to gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing at level 14 also makes the tank option viable if you should get to that point in the game. Therefore, this definitely warrants a 5-star rating. Next up is the Circle of Wildfire Druid, and the Circle of Wildfire Druid will be getting a 4-star rating. Wizards 100% realized their mistake when printing this original subclass in Unearthed Arcana and giving them Fireball. They knew that was a mistake pretty quick and took it out, replacing it with 3 different expanded spells. They added 2 spells at 2nd level that Druid gets, being Cure Wounds and Burning Hands, and ended up replacing Fireball with Revivify. And I know my comment section is going to disagree with me on this, but I put a lot of stake into revival spells and abilities when rating these subclasses, so I think that this still is powerful just for those reasons. The Wildfire Spirit is a decently statted minion that does scale pretty well into the mid-game with Enhanced Bond. However, I do feel that this loses some power just based off the fact that you have to take your bonus action to use the Wildfire Spirit to do anything. I know a lot of people disagree with my stance on the action economy, but think of it sort of like what I could do with the Circle of Stars Druid's bonus action versus what I can do with the Wildfire Druid's bonus action. I feel as though the Circle of Stars Druid has a lot more potential with its action economy, more so than the Wildfire Druid. The ability to auto-revive yourself should your Wildfire Spirit be out at level 14 is really strong, but again, comes in way too late into the game for me to accurately put this into the rating. So with that, still a very strong subclass, solid 4 stars. Next up, we have the Psi Warrior Fighter, and the Psi Warrior Fighter gets a 4-star rating. The Psionic Die mechanic is a very consistent scaling ability that definitely earns its place in this tier. This fighter subclass having a ranged tanking ability as well as additional damage baked into the same ability gives this a decent amount of versatility. The psionic abilities scale even further, starting at level 7, giving you the ability to fly or also attempt to CC a creature. And being able to nullify certain crowd control conditions on yourself makes this a very powerful mid-game subclass as well. However, where I fail to give this class a 5-star rating is how it does a lot of different things good, but not any specific thing great. So with that in mind, Psi Warrior, 4 stars. Next up, we have the Rune Knight, and the Rune Knight fighter gets 4 stars. This subclass does so many different things right. I absolutely love the rune mechanic, being able to inscribe different things on your gear to get different effects, being able to revise, overwrite your choices later on. The amount of versatility packed into this subclass is insane. There are so many different crowd control abilities, damage increasing abilities, tanking abilities, just outright reducing or nullifying damage to your party members. There's almost nothing this class cannot do. However, where this class does not gain the 5-star rating is in the fact that you can only use each of these runes 1 time per day. And while your other abilities that aren't the runes that deal extra damage do scale well into the mid game, the fact that you can only use these really powerful abilities that make this entire subclass one time until all the way to level 15 where you get to use them twice, that just makes this a bit too weak to gain the coveted 5-star rating. But still, really powerful subclass. I'm definitely making a Rune Knight fighter as my next fighter build. Still a solid subclass nonetheless. Next up, we have Monk, and we're going to start off with Way of Mercy Monk, and the Way of Mercy Monk is going to be the next subclass that gains my 5-star rating. Where this class gains the most of its power is in its simplicity and its consistency. There is absolutely nothing complicated about any of these abilities. There is no risk involved using any of these, and they are all very powerful. Being able to gain a flat heal and a flat damage increase at level 3 while only spending a key point on one of those two is really, really good. Coupled with this is even further scaling into the mid game with the flurry of healing and harm, being able to burst heal a teammate without spending any key points, mind you. You get to save all of the key points on the burst heal should you choose the heal over harm. And adding on to this is the additional conservation of your key points should you choose to use Hand of Harm during that burst heal. Everything about this subclass just works. It fulfills the archetype of additional damage on top of Monk, as well as if you want to play a more healer-based role, you can do both and excel at either. And that is why I believe that the Way of Mercy Monk deserves the next 5-star rating. Next up, we have Way of the Astral Self Monk, and the Way of the Astral Self Monk gets 3 stars. Now, why I'm rating this class as low as I am is due to the general inconsistency of the abilities and how they don't really pair well with each other, even though they look like they do. To begin, Arms of the Astral Self, one used to deal 2 different types of damage. There was indeed a nerf here. It used to be either Radiant or Necrotic, your choice. It did get changed to Force, which is still pretty good, but that is something that should be noted. The Arms of the Astral Self and Visage of the Astral Self, while meant to be used together, you're never really in a position to use them together. Your Arms of the Astral Self will cause any enemies within 10 feet of you to make a dex save or take 2 of your martial arts dice force damage. You can also use Visage of the Astral Self as part of that same bonus action, but why would you ever do that? You would only gain Dark Vision out to 120 feet and gain advantage on Insight and Intimidation checks, and being able to talk to a single creature isn't really something, all of these abilities paired together isn't really something you would need to do as part of the same bonus action. So while they can be used together, they don't really gel well, in my opinion, for what you would use this for. Body of the Astral Self is a nice feature at level 11, but it is a bit too limited in what it can deflect in terms of the damage types, but does make up for it with the empowered arms of just being able to deal extra flat damage. However, you do get that ability just a little bit too late into the game at level 11, and everything after that is basically pointless. You're never going to get to that point in the game, which is why I think that Way of the Astral Self Monk deserves a 3-star rating. Next up, we have the Oath of Glory Paladin, and the Oath of Glory Paladin gets a reprint out of 5. Next up, we have the Oath of the Watcher's Paladin, and the Oath of the Watcher's Paladin gets 3 stars. The expanded spell list of the Watcher's Paladin is mediocre at best, and while it does have some really nice abilities like the Channel Divinity of advantage on all Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma saving throws, as well as just gaining a flat bonus to your initiative rolls based on your proficiency bonus, all of the other abilities are a bit too niche to see general play and be good. In a very specific campaign with very specific enemy types, this would probably be a 5-star subclass, but since it only fits a very specific type of campaign or campaign setting, this is going to have to be dropped down to about 3 stars. Next up, we have the subclasses for the Ranger, beginning with the Fey Wanderer, and the Fey Wanderer Ranger is going to get 4 stars. The base level 3 abilities of Dreadful Strikes, as well as the expanded spell list being very reliable and good tier spells, make this a very reliable subclass to pick. The addition of the level 7 ability Beguiling Twist, essentially allowing you to throw back a CC of being Charmed or Frightened, is a nice touch. But where I believe this class really shines is in the level 11 Fey Reinforcements ability, allowing you to cast the Summon Fey spell without requiring concentration. It does take 1 minute, so you would cast this before combat, but being able to do this without having to concentrate on it just gives you an extra ally in the initiative order, giving you a massive advantage in the action economy when you get to this point in the class, and that is why I think it deserves a 4-star rating. Next up, we have the Swarmkeeper Ranger, and the Swarmkeeper is going to get another 4-star rating. This rating comes from the class's abilities, starting at the lower levels with the Gathered Swarm ability being able to deal extra damage or CC a target once per turn, as well as a decent expanded spell list. Writhing Tide at level 7, giving Rangers the ability to fly, is invaluable in a multitude of situations. And then towards the mid game around level 11, you are going to get better scaling on your lower level abilities, meaning this is a strong subclass to take. Next up, we have the Rogue subclasses, beginning with Phantom Rogue, and the Phantom Rogue is going to be getting 3 stars. While the bonus proficiency from Whispers of the Dead is a very nice addition to have as part of your Rogue subclass, most of the powerful abilities that are found in Phantom Rogue come in the much later stages of the game. You have your Tokens of the Departed coming in at level 9, almost probably towards the end of the game. Ghostwalk and Death's Friend, while both really powerful in their own right, just come way too late. This class, and while Rogue doesn't generally come online until later levels anyway, it really needs some help in the early game to carry itself up, and it just does not get it with this subclass. Next up, we have the Soulknife Rogue, and for the exact opposite reasons of the Phantom Rogue, this class gets 4 stars. While not personally tested, I do believe that these psionic powers both found in this Rogue subclass and the Fighter subclass are both going to have some serious implications for the game, and I think that they should not be undervalued as such. Being able to have a pool of almost guaranteed ability check successes in your arsenal starting at level 3 is, I think, way better than just having one additional bonus proficiency at level 3, which we saw in the Phantom Rogue. And while someone did point out that the Psychic Blades feature also at level 3 can only be activated as part of the attack action the way it is written, rather than being on any attack, I think its Psychic Blades still comes out as a pretty nice level 3 ability to have. And pushing in towards the mid game at the level 9 ability, being able to use your psionic dice in an even more versatile way also earns this Rogue subclass in its 4-star spot. Next up, we have the Sorcerer classes, beginning with the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, and the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer gets a 3-star rating. The only really nice ability that comes at the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer at the early stages is being able to cast any spell basically as subtle spell if you cast it with sorcery points. However, I don't think you burn through your sorcery points that fast when you can use them to use your MetaMagix options. I think that it's just a big waste of sorcery points. However, it is still a really good ability, viable enough that I would give this a 3-star rating. Every other part of this kit up until the late stage is just not good enough. Next up, we have the Manipulator of Time and Space, the Clockwork Soul Sorcerer, and I'm going to give the Clockwork Soul Sorcerer a 3-star rating. The level 1 ability of the Clockwork Soul Sorcerer to just negate advantage disadvantage starting 2 times per rest at level 1 is probably the only really good ability that you're going to get for the entire duration of the game. Bastion of Law can work well, but for a class that's all about time manipulation, there is way too much variance in this ability. Having to spend 5 sorcery points for the potential for either a 5 hit point shield or a 40 hit point shield is way too risky and way too high variance to be a safe pick. Trance of Order is a really powerful single-use ability, but you get it a bit too late towards probably the end game, and the capstone ability Clockwork Cavalcade is just way out of the realm of possibility of ever seeing play. So with that in mind, the lack of consistency on the 6th level ability paired with the very powerful effect and consistency of the 1st level ability gives this a 3-star rating. Next up, we have the Warlock subclasses, beginning with the Fathomless Warlock, and the Fathomless Warlock gets a 3-star rating. Tentacles of the Deep is a incredibly strong ability to get at level 1. Having a sort of sentry tentacle just attacking, being able to deal damage as part of your bonus action every turn is really great. However, all of the other abilities that come with that at the early game, Gift of the Sea, Oceanic Soul, are a bit too niche. In a Saltmarsh campaign, this Warlock subclass is a 5-star, but in any other general use case, there is not enough powerful abilities that could not only be tied to a water-based campaign. Guardian Coil at level 6 being able to reduce the damage an ally takes is very nice. However, Grasping Tentacles comes in a little late at level 10, and Fathomless Plunge is a bit too niche and a bit too weak for the capstone ability at level 14. So with all that being said, really nice and specific campaigns, 3 stars. Next up, we have the Genie Warlock, and the Genie Warlock is going to get a 4-star rating. Each of the Genie Warlock's abilities is good enough in some way to keep this class up at the 4-star rating. Bottled Respite, very fine level 1 ability. Being able to add flat damage based on your proficiency bonus starting at level 1 is very nice for Genie's Wrath. Elemental Gift, giving you a specific resistance, might not be too good, but the other side of that ability, being able to fly at level 6, around this period you're going to have a +3 bonus to your +3 proficiency bonus, meaning you can use this flying 10-minute ability 3 times per rest, which is very invaluable. Sanctuary Vessel functioning as a short rest plus to gain additional hit points for you and your entire party, very nice. And Limited Wish at the end game around level 14. The possibilities of Limited Wish are endless, ironically enough. So with that, Genie Warlock gets a 4-star rating from me. Next up, we have the Wizard subclasses, and to begin, we have the Bladesinger Wizard, which gets a reprint out of 5. However, I did make a mistake in my initial review of the Bladesinger Wizard. I did forget to mention one of the key revisions that was changed in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and that is the extra attack that Bladesinger Wizard gets can be exchanged for a cantrip cast. I certainly glossed over that. That's my bad. Still gets a reprint out of 5. Next up, we have the Order of Scribes Wizard, and the Order of Scribes Wizard is going to be the only subclass on this entire list that I am giving a 2-star rating. When trying to rate the abilities of the Scribes Wizard, I have to think about the prospect of diminishing returns and how powerful abilities are versus how much they're going to be used, and Wizardly Quill is not something that I need. The time spent to inscribe spells does not need to be reduced. The cost spent at level 2 also really doesn't need to be reduced. I feel like they could have given this Scribes Wizard something more powerful to work with. Both of those just in conjunction together of how little I use those on my wizard characters makes this not something I would want to take over some of the other wizard subclasses. Awakened Spellbook. The only good part about Awakened Spellbook comes from the ability to change damage types to a different spells, which is a very good feature. Don't get me wrong. Being able to change damage types on spells for something that is high damaging to bypass resistances is very powerful. But everything else around that, Manifest Mind does not do enough. It does a lot for your spellbook. It doesn't do enough for you. You can only cast from the spellbook 3 times by this point, equal to your proficiency bonus. Everything else is kind of irrelevant in that entire ability. Master Scrivener at level 10 is completely useless. Only a first or second level spell that has to have a 1-second casting time, mind you, is a bit too limiting. And the fact of the matter is only you can cast it. If you could like ascribe a spell, give it to one of your allies to cast at a different point, maybe that would be something different. But as this spell or as this ability is written, not powerful enough. One with the Word, while buffed from the Unearthed Arcana where you could only use it on death, now you can negate any damage, still has a bit too high of a cost that to, in my opinion, see play. So it's very unfortunate that I have to rate this subclass a 2 out of 5, but nonetheless, that's what I'm giving it. And with that in mind, guys, that is my review of all of these subclasses in Tasha's Cauldron and Everything by 1 through 5-star rating. Nothing got 1 star. 1 star would basically, you'd have to be a detriment to your team by picking this class. There's nothing you could do that's helpful at all. We had a really strong showing of subclasses in this book, guys. Don't get me wrong. There were some very clear winners, some pretty mediocre classes, and only a very few, we're gonna just call them losers for the sake of this video. If you guys enjoyed this video and enjoyed this review, be sure to leave this video a like and leave me a comment down below. Do you agree with me on anything? Do you disagree with me on anything? Let me know in the comments down below, guys. I'm excited to see what you guys think about this rating system. We are almost wrapped up with the entire video series on Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. The next video after this one should be, by request, a sort of patch notes video explaining everything in the subclass list that got changed from when it was written in Unearthed Arcana. A bunch of people asked me for that, so I'm just going to compile it all into one video. That's going to take me a while to read through, so expect that within the next couple days. But until next time, guys, have fun, stay safe, and as always, happy gaming.